So this morning I'm starting on a new project. I've decided to do something that's sort of seasonal. Years ago, my wife and I visited a sleigh rally, and I took a number of photographs, and I've dug back into the archives, and I've come up with this photograph here that I'm going to work from. So I'm going to show you. This is what you're looking at here is my computer screen. This is what I work from as reference. And I've currently got, this is open in Photoshop. I've got a few things going on. I'm going to clear a couple of layers here. I'm going to temporarily put a frame around this so that you can see better exactly what the original photo was. Okay, now you can see the original photo. So the first thing that I did was I expanded the canvas and turned it white. I've got it disabled right at the moment, but I'm going to re-enable it. Whoops, that's the wrong one. There we are. And now I'm going to get rid of the border around the original photograph. So I did this to create the scale that I want my main subject to be in the frame of the picture, and to position it in the frame where I want it. I'm not going to worry about the background. I kind of like the wood line in the back, but I can easily extend that in my painting. The only thing I'm really concerned about here is the main subject. I want to be able to draw that accurately, and I want to be able to do it at the scale that I'd like to have it in my final painting. So the other thing that I did was to overlay a grid pattern. I use this as a guide to help me draw more accurately. I could draw it without the grid, but it's a complicated subject, and I run the risk of making a drafting error and having that be more or less fatal in the final painting. Drafting is very important to me, being a realistic painter, and this is a tool that allows me to draw the subject accurately without tracing or projecting. It still requires that I be able to draw, but this essentially gives me a bunch of reference points and lines to help me get the scale and the details of my subject right. But I still have to be able to draw it. So I've created this the grid in Photoshop, and I scaled it to the size of a quarter sheet, which is the same scale that I use. It matches the scale of a full sheet if I choose to work that large, and by cropping a little bit, I can make it work on a half sheet. And generally speaking, it's a good proportion, a good aspect ratio for most of my work. On occasion, I will do something that's different, that's longer or taller, but most of the time I stick with this aspect ratio. It makes my life much simpler when it comes time to mat and frame. So that's my reference photo. Now I will show you the rest of the materials that I'm going to be working with for this first stage. So the first piece of the kit is my drawing board, and on it I've got a grid that I've printed on Bristol paper, which matches the grid that is on my reference photograph. It's critical that it match exactly, because otherwise the reference lines and points are useless. But this is exactly the same grid printed out on an 11 by 14 sheet of paper. So the grid itself measures 10 inches by 14 inches, and it's made up of boxes which are roughly square. They're not exactly square. I just divided the space by an appropriate number of lines, and then I added intermediate lines that are a lighter gray, lighter line weight, so that I have a more granular series of lines and reference points that I can refer to and to draw my subject accurately. The next thing is this is Canson tracing paper, foundation series tracing paper. There are a lot of tracing papers out there. This is the one that I like the best. This is 11 by 14 size. It's available in a number of different sizes, but this is the size I use the most. So I will be using one sheet of this, unless I make a mess of it, in which case I'll be using a second sheet, but usually it only requires one sheet. And then the last piece of equipment is my drawing utensils, and I'm using regular drawing pencils. I have lead holders, which I use on mechanical pencils, you might call them, that I use on occasion. But for this, I generally just use wooden pencils, and I generally use an HB or an F. They're both roughly the same degree of hardness, and they're both quite similar to a number 2 pencil, so a number 2 pencil works just fine too. This is my sharpener. Sharpener is critical. I've got erasers. I've got a bunch of other drawing tools here that I probably won't need. This is a tool that I use quite a lot. I probably use it more than I wish I had to, but this is a Papermate Tough Stuff eraser stick, and the cool thing about these is they're like mechanical pencils. You can advance the eraser, and it's quite stiff, and the stiffness makes it so that you can actually sharpen the eraser if you have an appropriate sharpener, and I have one around here somewhere. There we are. So with this sharpener, I can actually advance the eraser and sharpen it to a point, and then just slide it back in, and that gives me a lot more precision to my erasing. So this I use quite a lot for doing detailed erasures. I use a Staedtler Mars plastic for erasing large areas, which I try not to have to do, but things happen. Okay, so the only other thing that I'm going to need for this part of it is my blue painter's tape, and I prepare my paper by aligning the tracing paper with my grid paper, and I tape it down with 2 pieces of tape. 2 pieces of tape is generally adequate. You can use more if you need to for this stage, but ordinarily 2 pieces of tape is all I need. So with that, I think I'm gonna use my F pencil. Their F and HB are so close that I really haven't noticed much difference. I'm gonna sharpen it so that I have a precision drawing instrument. I also sometimes use this. This is a little support that I made that allows me to tilt my drawing panel up so that it makes it a little more comfortable to draw on. For my painting, I insist on my paper being dead flat because it gives me more control over the wet washes that I use. But for drawing, I don't need to worry about that, so I can get away with tilting it, which makes it more comfortable. So now I'm zooming in on my my photograph to decide on a starting point. And the way that I start is I look for an intersection of lines in my grid that an edge of my subject crosses at or very close to. So in this case, I think the place that makes the most sense is right there where the horse's collar and neck, the top edge of the horse's neck are virtually right on the intersection of my two grid lines there. Another possibility would be right here where the horse's rear quarter, the rump of the horse, comes very close to the intersection of my two grid lines. It's not critical which one I choose, but I do need to start somewhere, and it's good to start somewhere that's easy to locate accurately, because I'm going to build the rest of my drawing off of whatever I choose as the starting point. So I think I'm going to go with my first instinct, which is the neck and collar area. So the first thing that I do is I count down and across from whichever direction to find the intersection that I'm looking for. So in this case, I'm coming down 2 lines and across from the right edge 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and down 2. So this is where I want to start, right there. So now that I've located that, I can zoom in on my subject quite a bit more, on the photograph that is, so that I can see the details better. And because I have a known starting point, I can just build from line to line. I want to pay attention to the angle of the line and where it takes me to. In developing my drawing, I want to include enough detail to give me the information that I need to develop the painting, but I don't want to overwhelm myself with so much information that it becomes unwieldy. In a painting this size, I'm mostly concerned about the big shapes. So it's easy when you have the ability to zoom in on your subject, as I do, to include way more information than you're likely to be able to use. So you need to kind of be constantly filtering the information that you're including. If I was drawing this without the help of my grid, it would probably be a mistake to be working in such detail in a small area. It's much better to kind of block out the large shapes and get the proportions and positions of the major elements roughed in before you start adding in as much detail as I am. But because I'm using the grid, I can get away with being fairly detailed and be relatively certain that I'm not going to end up overdeveloping something only to find out that I've got the position or the proportions wrong. Especially on this harness, which is pretty complicated. If I have the major elements blocked in accurately, I can add in the smaller details, like there's a bunch of brass work and stuff on the collar that I'm not including, but if I've got the collar drawn accurately, I can add those details in as I'm painting if I think that they are important enough to the painting to bother adding them at all.